All right, we are live. Welcome to another episode of Tuesday Night Live on the 10 Horse Money YouTube channel. We're just talking about this crazy weather that's been going on, and JB is showing a picture of his buddy down in where's that? Gulf Shores.
Gulf Shores. I looked at it. They predicted 6.5 inches of snow in Gulf Shores, Alabama.
That's insane. Yeah. I was getting ready to say before we went live. You remember when I can't remember how many years ago that was, but when they had, I think it was some sort of an ice storm. It might have been when we had, I can't remember when this was, but those alligators down there in Florida, they were freezing, and they were just like.
Remember the iguanas were falling out of trees?
Yeah, they were falling out of trees.
It's crazy. Yeah, they're not built for that kind of stuff down there in the South.
No, they freeze to death. They will have to have therapy after this.
Heck, I'm not built for what we got going on today here.
It was brutal here.
Yeah, when I got in the truck this morning, it was 5 degrees. I took a little picture of it, and then this afternoon it got up to like 17, and that was about as warm as it got today. So we just got to get through tomorrow, and then it's supposed to start warming up a little bit.
It's supposed to be a little bit warmer tomorrow, isn't it?
Yeah, I saw 40, 47 or something on Saturday. So
well, yeah, I was thinking about it this week that I'm done with deer season now, and I was like, I'll go fishing this weekend, and I'm thinking, well, heck, everything's going to be still frozen by the weekend, even though it's going to be in the the high 40s. So
you'll have to go to Lake of Egypt. That's probably
I know.
That's the only thing that's open right now. It's unfortunate, but at least you get out on the water.
I have to take Uncle Ron a bottle of bourbon and talk him into taking me fishing. So
there you go. He will. He'll probably be on here in a little bit.
Is that lake you were talking about a hot water lake?
Power plant.
Yeah, it's a power plant lake. It's over near Marion, Illinois, and they're shutting down a lot of those power plant lakes over there. They kind of reduce the capacity of it, or they reduce the power production about 6 or 7 years ago. So it used to be running. They'd have like 3 smokestacks going when they were generating full power, and now there's just kind of a trickle. But it is enough. It's enough warm water to keep it open most of the time. I mean,
it did freeze. Was it last year or the year before?
No, it was about 4 years ago when it did.
Was it that long?
Mm-hmm.
The whole. I guess that would be the lower end down there by the dam where the discharge is at. I've never seen it frozen, and it was
frozen. Yep, it was frozen. Just couldn't keep up. But right now, as of there were some people texting or talking about it on Facebook, and people are saying that it's still open right now. So I think it'll stay open. It'll be cold. All right, we got a bunch of people piling in here. That's awesome, man. Got a good show planned tonight. We got Keeper Shears over there, former owner of War Eagle Custom Lures, and everybody knows about the War Eagle Spinnerbait. I mean, it's like you can't walk into a bait shop or Walmart or everywhere in the country, and it's on the shelf. So definitely, in my opinion, the most popular spinnerbait in America. It's always been one of my favorites. I've caught a ton of fish on a War Eagle spinnerbait over the years, and I'm excited to talk to Keith tonight and kind of get the backstory. And he's made some. He's got some big plans for this year coming up as far as tournament fishing's going on, and we're gonna cover everything. So Keith, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your evening and jumping on here and talking some fishing with us.
No, well, thank you guys for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Definitely. Before we get started, just got to give a shout out to some of the sponsors that help this live stream. Bass Braid. You guys are looking for a premium 8-strand braid. It's that time of year where we got cabin fever. We're going through our reels. We're cleaning our reels. We're changing out our line, just waiting for. Heck, I mean, we're waiting for like 45-degree days now, but the warmer the better. But it's a great time to tear all that old line and re-spool. And Bass Braid has been with us for about 2 months now. Very high quality braid at a very reasonable price. So you can get online and check them out. And as always, support the brands that support this channel. And Baitworks has been with us for a long time, and we will be giving away a $25 Baitworks gift card sometime during the stream. And the way we're going to do this the way we did it last week is kind of fun. We got away from it, but we're gonna get back to it sometime. And Keith doesn't know this, but sometime during the stream, we're gonna make a reference to Sasquatch. So when you hear that reference, everybody that's on here, guess a number between 1 and 200, and whoever guesses the number that I have written down here, I got to send that number to Jonathan too, so he can do the number checks for me. But whatever number I got written down here, whoever guesses that number is going to win a $25 Baitworks gift card. So keep your ears peeled for that. Yeah, let me send this to you real quick, Jonathan, just so you got it. I want to keep it all honest. Don't want any shenanigans going on here.
We'll try our best, bud. We'll try our best.
Yeah. So, I really wanted to dive into the War Eagle story. Start from the very beginning, before you even had that company, before you even started that company. What was going on in your life, and then how did it come to be? How did it come to fruition?
Wow, have you got that much time tonight on
we
the
got
show?
we got all night.
Oh my goodness! Well, of course, what got me into the industry, of course, was the passion for fishing. Like all of us. But no, I grew up in Wyandotte, Oklahoma, northeast Oklahoma on Grand Lake, and grew up fishing, Grand Lake and 10 Killer. And as soon as I got out of school in 1984, I moved to Northwest Arkansas because I've always loved this area. And, I taught high school biology for 2 years, and that's not actually what I went to school to do. I got a degree in fisheries and wildlife management, but the jobs at the time were far and few in between in that area. And so I taught school at a little town west of Bentonville for 2 years, and then I got involved with a family that was ate up with fishing as much as I was. They used to come down to the Tuesday and Friday night jackpots at Hickory Creek Marina. They're here on Beaver Lake, where I worked during the summertime in between teaching. And I had an old boat, I had an old boat with a 150 on it. And this father and son would come down there with a little 16-foot aluminum boat and a 10-horse motor. And it was one of them shotgun starts, everybody lined up at the edge of the buoys, and the dock owner would walk out there and fire a shotgun in the air, and everybody'd take off, and they would hang on to the side of the dock till everybody left, and then they'd go fishing. And one time, I got to know them pretty well, and I said, man, why don't you guys just start taking my boat? Because I took my boat to work with me every day, because I'd go fishing as soon as I got off work. And so they started using it, and we developed a friendship. And I ended up, the dad owned a painting and wall covering business. And I ended up quitting my job and going to work for them so I could fish more. Yeah, that made mom and dad real proud. And but the gentleman's name that I went to work for was Rodney McClellan, and his son, who at the time was in high school still, was Mike McClellan.
Huh.
And so for the next, 8 or 9 years, Mike and I team fished together. We team fished all over the country, and had some success. And then finally the day came, where he got to go on and really pursue his career as a professional fisherman. And I somehow ended up making spinnerbaits for a living. But and that came about. I was just getting my feet wet fishing the local tournaments here on Beaver, and I met a guy here that to me was a legend around here, because he won a lot of tournaments, and real good fisherman, real good guy. His name was Gene Vandiver, and Gene was always tinkering with stuff at home, making jigs, making spinnerbaits. And at the time, when I quit the painting and wall covering business, I went to work at Lakeland Marine selling boats. And, I worked, 6 days a week. And he come walking in one day. There was a real good local circuit here called OBAA, Ozark Bass Anglers Association. They drew about 150, 160 boats a tournament. And he come walking in early one March, a week before the tournament. He said, I need a partner. And I'm like, well, I work all the time. I can't practice. He said, I don't care. I just want you in my boat on tournament day. And so that's how he and I started fishing together. And as a matter of fact, we won that tournament, the very first tournament we ever fished together, we won. And we started branching out, started fishing Central Pro-Am tournaments together. I finally was able to take off a little bit more time from work to fish that circuit. And we were up at, matter of fact, your lake, Lake of the Ozarks, early one spring. And we come in from practice, and Gene said, man, they're really biting this one spinnerbait. He said, and he always carried everything to make baits with him in his truck, And so that night in the hotel room, he said, I need to show you how to make these in case I die someday. You need to know how to do all this. And so he was showing me how to make them in the hotel room that night. And he made the mistake of saying that, you could probably sell enough of these in the local tackle stores to pay for your habit. And he should have never said that. Because the next thing I knew, a couple of years later, after we were making them at home in our garages and selling them to the local stores, I ended up quitting the very good job that I had to start making spinnerbaits for a living. And from there, 27 years later is where it kind of ended,
Did you have, so when you, first of all, that's a big decision to quit a job to make spinnerbaits. So I'm assuming that you had a pretty high demand. I mean, you had to have a decent feel that maybe you could, make an okay living just doing that, or you wouldn't have quit a good job.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We definitely had a life-changing event happen. No, we were really just selling the baits loose on a rack in local tackle stores around Northwest Arkansas. And the very first Bassmasters tournament that Mike McClellan fished, he won it on a War Eagle spinnerbait.
Oh.
The second tournament he fished, he won it on a War Eagle spinnerbait. So here we are. We don't even have a company. We don't even have a phone number. And that's back when Bassmasters was on TNN, and they ran it constantly. They just ran it constantly. And, I come in, I was still selling boats then at the time at Lakeland. And I come in from work one day, and the phone rang there at home. And this guy said, are you the guy that makes War Eagle spinnerbaits? And I said, yes, sir, I am. How can I help you? And he said, you can get a blankety blank phone is what you can do. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, this is Bill down at War Eagle Marina, and I get 50 phone calls a day. I can't get anything done. And yeah, true story. And so I called Gene and told him what was going on. And the next day I had the phone company run out and run a separate phone line to a bedroom to an answering machine. And every night I'd get home from work and it would be full. Independent retailers from all over the United States were calling, wanting to know how to get baits. We didn't even have a package. We didn't even have really a name. They were, around here, War Eagle was kind of a common domain name because of War Eagle River, War Eagle Mill, blah, 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 all that stuff, So, people were kind of calling them War Eagle spinnerbaits. Somebody would win a tournament on Beaver Lake, and they'd say, well, I went up War Eagle River and caught them on this spinnerbait, And so it just kind of fell into place. People were calling them War Eagle spinnerbaits. And, it was a public domain name, so that's what we rolled with. But yeah, it wasn't shortly after that after we got things lined out, I quit my job. And for the next 2 years, Pretty much just lived out of my truck, starving to death.
Wow. That's
how about that? Like with Mike winning back-to-back tournaments on that bait, like you talk about a Cinderella story happening.
Yeah.
At least, I mean, probably in business, it's good and it's very good and it's very bad, all in the same mix, right?
Yeah, I've always heard about small companies starting up, having growing pains, but I had growing pains for 27 years.
Yeah.
But,
Well,
as a matter of fact, when the company did sell, I mean, I had a set of blueprints on my desk, and I was getting ready to buy 3 acres next to the building that I had built. I was going to add on, and I had like 27 employees, and I was going to try to hire at least that many more and double the size of my building. I mean, I was getting ready to borrow, a big chunk of money, and then boom, all of a sudden, I sold it. But it was a bittersweet decision at the time, but things happen for a reason, and it's all been good.
So how did you come up? Well, first time I saw War Eagle spinnerbait, one of the things that jumped out, there's a couple things, I guess. The skirt's different than most. You had a different skirt design. The hand tied. I mean, I like the wire tied skirt, but the one thing that really jumped out to me was the chrome head, or the gold head, gold hook, the gold plated head, and it took me. I didn't have confidence in it because I was so used to throwing a normal painted head, and that chrome to me looked like a Christmas tree ornament. It was just it was like too much to me until I started throwing it more and more, and I got confidence in it. And now it looks like, something you'd want to tie on. But where did that concept for that chromed out head and the chrome hook come from?
We were sick and tired of painting heads. we were painting heads, painting eyes on them, a 2-color eye, and then you let those dry, and then you put a clear coat of epoxy on top of that. And we needed to speed things up. And gold and nickel are really 2 natural colors in a fish's environment, if you think about it. And we started, Gene, my mentor that, walked me through all of this for the first couple of years. I always tell people he's smarter than a tree full of owls, and he started looking into plating the bait, and we sent some samples off to have done and tested them, and come to find out they were a lot more durable than paint, and they look good. I mean, they look sharp, and our bait was kind of designed for these clear water Ozark highland reservoirs, but we did incorporate some other stuff for dirty water. But yeah, the gold and nickel plated just worked out, and the hand tied skirts, that was just another one of those deals. We couldn't find a skirt that we liked, slipping along with rubber bands and stuff. The skirt had no action. It had no flair. And we were always tinkering with ways on, when we first started, I mean, we tied everything with flat rubber, and they look good in the water, but, your color selection is pretty limited. And, after time, that rubber deteriorates. And so we come up with a way how to hand tie these with silicone to where we could have a short, thicker upper part and then a long tail underneath it that actually had action going through the water from that back blade. And, our skirts, hand tying our skirts is what kept us small. But, like I mentioned earlier, before the podcast, I was kind of the best and the worst asset of the company because I was so picky. For years, it just seemed like I wanted to pick up and look at every bait before it left the shop, But the hand tie and the skirts is, what made it a premier spinnerbait, and the head design. We played with head designs so much, and a lot of spinnerbaits on the market at the time, they had a flat head with an eye in it. They look pretty in the package, but you throw them out there and you burn them and they roll. If you run it through brush, it lays flat, it gets hung up. And it was getting to where we couldn't keep up with production. And a buyer for one of the major retailers suggested that we go talk to Gail, Julian, and Ken over at Jewel Baits and KG Enterprise over around the Mountain Home area there at Midway. And, we were, Ken, he was, and Gail, they've got the background of being tool and die makers. And, to me, they're just geniuses on, if you tell them an idea, they'll come up with it. And Ken got to playing on a computer he had that it wasn't water dynamics, but it was wind dynamics. And he could draw any kind of shape of a head on that spinnerbait on there and show how the wind would go around it. And we come up with this head design, and it was the first time I'd ever thrown a spinnerbait that actually the skirt had action. And so, yeah, it was, believe me, it wasn't easy or everybody would be doing it.
How many years ago was that we're talking when you came up with that, the current design of it?
Probably, we'd only been in business a couple years. So the last 25 years of it is when we had what we have now.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, a 2-year period, but, we were always changing, trying to perfect the bait.
Were you pouring them you guys yourself at the time?
Oh, gosh, yes. Yeah. Yeah, I'd get home from work and I would walk through the garage and, I had a 10-pound lead pot right there in the garage, and I would plug it in and turn it on, go in the house, eat supper, and go back out and start pouring heads. And Gene was doing the same thing.
Wow. So you were pouring all that out of a 10-pound pot?
Yeah. We filled it up a lot.
Well, those of that don't know, that's impressive. That is really, really impressive. That's what I use to pour all my stuff. Is just with
a one cavity mold. We were fast.
Yeah,
they were super custom. So you started out there. What was the next step? Like, when did you move up to a next level where you could produce, more than just one at a time?
We started getting a good foundation of independent retailers with us. I know one of the first phone calls I had was from a store in Charlotte, North Carolina. I can't remember. Byron's General Store, Robbie Byron. And, I think he was one of the first stores that I shipped to out of state. And, we just started getting them, in certain places all over the United States. And plus too, the professional fishermen, they were calling us too, other than, Mike McClellan, the first pro that really called us, like in 1997, was Gerald Swindle, and, I never will forget this. And for the 27 years I was in business, I never had another pro fisherman approach me this way. But he called one day and told me who he was. And, I live in Warrior, Alabama, and I'm going to be a pro fisherman someday. and you've got the best spinnerbait on the market. One of these days you're going to sponsor me, but first let me show you what I can do for you. And for about the next 6 months, it seems like there wasn't hardly a day that went by he didn't call, and he would be standing in a tackle store somewhere in the Southeast, you know, of course, a lot of stores in Alabama. And he'd say, I'm here at such and such place, talking to the owner of such and such place. I'm going to hand the phone to you, you know, hand the phone to him. And, you know, so it's just, you know, that's how we just grew by word of mouth, you know. And then the first FLW tournament that Gerald ever fished was on Beaver Lake, and he won it on a War Eagle spinnerbait.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's a cool story.
Yeah. And so, yeah, you know, we grew and grew and grew. You know, there was a lot of times that I was really wanting to move faster than what we were moving. And, you know, there at the end, you know, the reason for expanding and building another building and going into debt up to my ears was, you know, I wanted to get into hard baits and soft plastics, and, you know, that was my next step. But we never made it.
Yeah, when you so back in the day when all this got started, did you like the process of actually committing to a design? I know there's a, you know, I know kind of how the testing goes, and it's a tedious process. You know, luckily you had, you know, some computers to kind of, you know, help finalize that head design. But when you got to a point, like you're working on this design, design, the skirt and the head design and the chrome plating or nickel plating, gold plating, that kind of stuff. And then you come up with this thing and you're like, I think this is it. Let's go in. Was that like you were just ready to go? Like you'd had, you know, you're like, we've been doing all this testing, I'm ready to throw it out there and get after it? Or were you still wanting to test? Or when did you finally come to the point where you're like, okay, we've got it, this is it, let's go with it?
Now, after we got that head design from KG, we knew we had what we wanted, and we ran with it. You know, as far as the colors went, you know, some of the colors we tested a lot before we put them in a package. Some of them we didn't. You know, I may run down to the ramp at Prairie Creek and throw it in the water and say, yeah, that'll catch them, and go with it. But a lot of the colors, you know, we would experiment with. But in the blade combinations, you know, I mean, and that's one thing that made us different than most companies. You know, like we had 5 different sizes of spinnerbaits, but they also had 5 different blade combinations.
Yeah.
You know, you could get it in a double willow leaf, a Colorado willow leaf, a tandem Colorado, a tandem Indiana, or a single spin. And, you know, that's one thing that, you know, kept us. And, you know, we did a lot of custom work, you know, which kept us small. You know, like if there was a store in Tennessee that said, you know, man, this is a really good color around here, can you guys make one for us that way? Well, yeah, we'd do it, you know. So, yeah, we were unique in the day.
We got somebody on here that said he used to work with you. You know this fella, Chris Johnson?
Chris Johnson, yes, sir.
He was our guest. He was our guest last week, man. Great guy. Great guy. We had great conversation, man.
I think Chris probably makes spinnerbaits in his sleep now, like I still do.
Hey, he showed us some of his paper graphs, which was kind of cool.
Oh, I've got them on a top shelf out here in my boat barn.
I'm gonna have to, JB. We're like the only people that don't have paper graphs. Everybody's got paper graphs.
I have to go raid Dad's house. I don't know. He may still have one over there. I don't know.
There was a couple questions. Let me get.
There was one. Doug had it with auto.
Yeah, Doug and Fishing Junkie. Can you still get the extra thump blades?
Is he talking about the Arrowhead ultravide blade?
I'm not sure.
I bet they're
Doug?
both still on here, and they'll answer that here quickly.
Yeah, they'll chime back.
If he's talking about the Arrowhead ultraviolet blade, as far as I know, you can't. I know who has the stamp for it. There used to be a company called the Georgia Blade, and they use that blade. And when they went out of business, Zoom Bait Company bought the stamp for that blade. And I used to stay in touch, and still do, with the guys down at Zoom pretty regularly. And, I was visiting with Ed Chambers one day, and I said, he said, he gave me a handful of blades. He said, you really ought to try that. It really puts off a different vibration than any other blade out there. And he was correct. And so we added that to our line in a few of the, prime colors. And, but yeah, it was, it's a heavier blade, and it's got an arrowhead design, and it pulls real hard. But as far as I know, I don't know if you can still get those or not.
Okay. Here's another guy you might know, Travis Harriman.
Travis Harriman.
He said, what color spinnerbait was Gerald throwing?
Gerald was throwing the sun perch.
Okay.
It's kind of a chartreuse color with a bright orange belly. But now it was different. I mean, he come walking in the shop one night after practice, and he said, okay, this is the color I want, but I want it on a 3/4 ounce head, gold head. And he said, I want a number 4 white Colorado up front and a big hammered nickel willow leaf on the back. And I said, dude, that's ugly. He said, that's what I want. And so I sat down there that night and made him a handful of them. And that's what he caught a lot of his fish on during the tournament. But yeah, sun perch was the color he was using. And Travis, the other day I sent Travis, it was here a while back, a picture of a fish that I'd caught. And I said, here I am, I'm holding a fish with a 3-inch minnow in its mouth and a spinning rod. And he messaged me back, and he said, welcome to the dark side.
Well, that's the truth. It's changed everything for sure.
So did KG start pouring them for you guys then at that point?
KG over at Midway? Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. KG Enterprise, Ken and Gail Julian over there, they could make them faster and better than we could ever think about doing it. A lot changed right there. We were able to then order our wires pre-bent and have them sent to them to fit their molds. And, their casting is the best in the industry over there. They don't use silicone spin casts. They use aluminum molds. And, every head is uniform, flawless. And from there, they would go to Isle, Minnesota to be plated. And then from Isle, Minnesota, they would come back to us, and we would tie the skirts on them, put blades on them, and package them. But
yeah, we actually Gabe and I were fortunate enough to take a tour of their factory down there.
Yeah.
And yes, I have a very, very new respect for how they do things.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They've got it down.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah, that was fun. That was good. That was cool to walk through that. I wanted to do some footage, but he had some top secret stuff going on back in there. He would show me. That's Gail.
I would imagine there's lots of secrets that.
Yeah, he's always tinkering. He had. It was funny. He had one situation that he was trying to figure out how to fix, and you could tell he'd been soaking on it for a while, and he broke it down and told us a certain scenario, and it was something real simple, but he had been focusing on trying to get that fixed. So that's the kind of attention to detail that they pay down, that they give their process down there. Is like, You know, they're just not going to let stuff slide. If there's something that's kind of rubbing them the wrong way, they're going to sit there and soak on it until they figure out how to take care of it.
Yeah.
Well, and the amount of humans in that factory, like they're paying people down there to put your lures together. It's not.
Oh yeah.
It's American made stuff. That's
Oh,
what
yeah.
you know, it hits home for me. So
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. You know, and you know, to me that was a big deal. You know, I preached it for 27 years, made in the USA, and you know, to me that was a big deal. So I hope it meant a lot to the fishermen.
What was the what would you say the number one most popular selling spinnerbait was? Like as far as blade combination and size?
Definitely the number one combination was a double willow leaf,
Mm-hmm.
and still to this day that's my favorite. You know, of course the
Probably
whites.
3/8.
3/8 and half. 3/8 was probably the best seller. My favorite is a half. But you know, the double willow leaf, of course, the white and chartreuse, you know, sold real good. The shad colors, you know, the mouse and the blue herring, you know, were hard to beat. But yeah, it was a fun process. It wasn't easy by no means, but it was fun to watch it grow. Met a lot of good people in the industry.
Yeah, I have.
so in the beginning, Keith, did you all bend your own wires and all that?
In the very beginning, yes, we did. Sure did. Had the little wire bender mounted to a table, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Ooh, I don't miss those days at all.
That's my favorite color right here.
What is that?
That blue herring shad.
The
Okay.
blue herring.
I love that one.
Yeah, that's good bait.
I'm partial to mouse, I'll be honest.
Yeah, I like the mouse too.
Yeah, mouse is a good one. And you know we worked with Z-Man and Skirts Plus on colors, you know, and they were great to work with, you know, like that mouse was such a good color, you know, I would call them up, you know, and I'd say, hey, that mouse color, can we add some red flake to it, you know? I'll make one called a bleeding mouse and put a few strands of red in it. And then, you know, it went over well. So, you know, I'd call them up and say, hey, that mouse color, let's go back to it. Can we put purple flake in it? And I'll put some purple strands in
it. Yeah.
But
yep.
yeah, they were great to deal with.
Yeah, there's a bunch of good colors in it. I've caught fish on a lot of these colors. And then that little finesse.
Yeah, Big Mike was talking about that. He was talking about the Get 5 Quick. I think that's the finesse, isn't it?
This is a good one too, the Screaming Eagle. You know, it's like this is a 3/4 one, but I throw the 1/2 ounce one a lot. It's got a 1/4 ounce profile, but it's a 1/2 ounce bait. So if you're in a situation where you really need to move that bait a little bit quicker, but keep it from, you know, blowing out on you, that's a pretty good one.
And I think I can talk about this. I've got a Screaming Eagle in my hand right here, right now. But I was still working at Lakeland Marine, selling boats, and every year I worked at a big tracker dealership, and every year they had a national deal called Tracker 21 Club. And if you were one of the top 21 tracker salesmen in the nation, you got to go spend 3 days at Big Cedar Lodge and fish with the Tracker Pro staff. And I qualified for that one year, and the first person I got to fish with was Rick Klum. And he and I have talked about this afterwards, so I think it's okay if I talk about it. But he had just drove in. He didn't even have his boat. They loaned him a boat, loaned him some rods and reels. He went in the little tackle store there at the boat dock at Big Cedar and bought some lures. And he came out there and he was sitting in the boat, and he had bought some 1/4 ounce spinnerbaits. Not War Eagle. War Eagle didn't even have a name then. I was selling them locally at the local tackle stores, but we didn't even have a name then. And Rick took that, it was in the fall of the year, and he took that 1/4 ounce spinnerbait, and he had a package of rubber core lead sinkers. And he took that rubber core out and he slid it up on the shank of the spinnerbait and he crimped it on there with his pliers. And he looked at me and he said, "You know what this will do?" And I said, "No, what?" And he said, "Now this bait weighs a 1/2 ounce. It's got the profile of a 1/4 ounce bait. I can throw it twice as far, reel it twice as fast, and it won't jump out of the water." And man, you know, I'm sitting there just thinking, oh gosh, I could have a mold made for that. and so, you know, at the time he didn't know it. And at the time I really didn't know it, but that's how the Screaming Eagle came about, by watching him do that day.
Huh.
Just out of necessity, just kind of taking what you had and making what you need.
Well, you know, in the fall of the year, the bait fish, you know, are a lot smaller. And, you know, if it's windy, you know, it's hard to get any distance on a 1/4 ounce spinnerbait. And with a bait that weighs a 1/2 ounce with a small profile, you can throw it a lot farther. But the main key is you can reel it a lot faster without it jumping out of the water.
Mm-hmm.
You can really burn it. So, yeah.
Here's another question from another guy you might know, Connor Cunningham.
Oh, gosh.
He said, "Keith, what's your favorite spinnerbait color in 34-degree water? I'm having trouble getting bit this time of year, and I know you have the answers."
I think it's a 3-inch minnow, isn't it?
That's what I'm thinking.
Well, if the water is dirty, which knowing Connor, it probably is, in dirty water, that coleslaw is the best cold water spinnerbait we have. It's a white spinnerbait with a white head, has a little orange and chartreuse on the skirt, but the key is it has white blades. And it is the best cold water dirty bait that we made. Now, if it's clear water, I'd tell you to tie on a jerkbait.
How's that? That's it right there. That's got the painted eyes still on it.
Yeah. Yep.
I like how, you know, the whole story behind it, just the, you know, why something, and it was for simplicity, and you got tired of painting heads. And I mean, there was a lot that went into it, but at the end of the day, it's a very, very simple design in comparison to what exists from other manufacturers today, right? Like, you look at some of these other spinnerbaits and the heads are all odd shapes. Like you said, they roll out. You can't keep them on track. Now, I'm not saying that there's not good spinnerbaits out there, because I threw a plethora of spinnerbaits, I can tell you that, and they all have their place.
Yeah.
But, you know, day in and day out, I think it's, at least for me and Gabe, it's War Eagle in our boat a lot of times.
Yeah, and a lot of it, you know, to me has to do, you know, with that head design and the hand-tied skirt and the right size, you know, the right sizes of blades. You know, I would look at a lot of these spinnerbaits and, you know, like this company kind of had a good head design, a bullet-shaped type head, but the blades would be all wrong, you know. And, you know, another one, you know, might have the right blades but have a horrible head design. There was a time I was buying like 3 different brands of spinnerbaits and tearing them apart so I could make one that I liked, you know. And but yeah, it was just a combination, you know, in our packaging. You know, when we were growing and knew we had to come up with a good package, you know, I would go to tackle stores and look at the packaging, and, you know, back then everybody had a big thick header card with glue on it. You had your bubble clam. You'd lay your bait in it, put the heavy header card with glue on it. You had a machine that come down and heated it, and that's how you packaged the bait. Half the time the clamshell wouldn't stay glued to the card, so they would staple it, you know. And, you know, you couldn't have just one machine. You had to buy 2 for when one broke down. And, you know, I got to looking, and it wasn't even in the fishing department, but I think might have been like at Lowe's or somewhere in the hardware section. I seen a screwdriver that was in a clamshell, and they even advertised it as a usable package. And so we started playing with a different clamshell to put the bait in. And when I came up with that package, you know, the major retailers were like, wow, you know, this is like the Neiman Marcus of spinnerbaits. And, you know, the package displayed the bait better than anything else that anyone else had. And yeah, it was reusable. I didn't really use them as a reusable package, but, you know, it kept the skirt flared out the way it needed to be. The bait hung naturally in the package. And so, you know, we got a lot of praises, you know, just like something simple over the packaging.
Well, you don't think about that from a retail perspective that glue, it may leave your shop, like you're saying, that card and that glue on that bubble pack, like it may leave your shop intact, but by the time I got there, it may have fallen, 3 of them might have fallen off. And now the retailer's sitting there complaining that we got to fix this. We got to fix this.
Right. Exactly.
But something as simple as that and how far that goes. And I don't know the cost difference between one and the other, but I would imagine labor cost was a heck of a lot cheaper on what you guys have, because you didn't have machines for it. It was just you doing it.
Absolutely. So, absolutely. Yeah.
Crazy. The little things that, you know, that make such a big difference. When you said the card, I went into where my grandfather used to go to the crappie store and he'd buy a card of baits, and how simple that was, just to staple a bunch of little clear pieces of plastic on a paper, and he'd buy a whole card of them, but you could see them all, and it was easy for him to throw in the tackle box. But some of the simplest ideas are the best ideas.
That's right.
So,
yeah.
Here's a question. Curtis wants to know, Keith, what is your opinion on trailer hooks?
I throw a trailer hook 90% of the time on a bait. The way we tied our skirts, you really didn't need to add a soft plastic trailer, because that long tail back there, it would hide a trailer hook real good and still have action. But you can still, you know, put your split tail trailer on there or curly tail trailer, and then put your trailer hook on behind it, on the shank of your hook. And it's probably higher than that. It might be 95% of the time I throw a trailer hook always.
Why would you not throw a trailer hook?
If I'm fishing real heavy cover, you know, I might not throw a trailer hook. I don't, if I'm fishing heavy cover with a single spin, I very seldom use a trailer hook. But on the double willy spinnerbaits, when I'm burning them, I've always got a trailer hook on, and most other times as well.
Yeah, around here we fish a lot of grass, so I have a tendency not to fish a trailer hook. But if I was fishing more rocky, you know, highland reservoirs, why not have a treble hook on there? Or not treble hook, but a trailer hook on there.
So we can go down the really rabbit hole here with trailer hooks. Does it swing, or does it?
It swings. I don't use the thick rubber stuff that comes in the package. I'll take like a 6-pack ring that's on top of a 6-pack of pop or vitamin water or something. I take those off and I cut them into little sections, and I fold it over the eye of the trailer hook, and then run the spinnerbait hook through it, and then trim it, and that way it's free hanging, and it always runs straight, and I like that way a lot better.
I'm in the same boat as you. I got gimmicked into buying one of those little tools that they have for it, but it's the same principle, and it's basically a hole punch piece of plastic.
And that works too.
I run that on there. So, yep.
Yep.
Yeah, Stephanie says what's pretty much the standard weight spinnerbait. I mean 3/8 and a half. I think you're right, Stephanie. Half is for sure, but I'd almost say most people start out with like a 3/8. I mean, I know that's what I started out with, is a 3/8, and then
3/8. Yeah, 3/8 was probably our most popular seller. You know, I probably could go out and say the avid fishermen, probably a 1/2 ounce was their favorite. I like a 1/2 ounce better. But there's times, I mean, if you're fishing extremely shallow, like if you're fishing over shallow grass, a 3/8 would be better.
Mm-hmm. I've progressed in my spinnerbait prowess. I'm a 3/4 guy. Like,
yeah,
I like a big heavy spinnerbait, and I like a lot of thumps. So
yeah,
but I tell you what, there's a lot of times where you got to have a quarter.
Yeah.
There's been days where I couldn't really get bid on a 3/8 or a half, and you pick up that really smaller profile 1/4 ounce, and unlike the Screaming Eagle, you know, it's actual 1/4 ounce bait where you can slow reel it, and you'll pick up some bites like that.
Absolutely.
Oh, we won tons of tournaments on that 1/4 ounce bait in the fall here. There's just days where it's going to get you more bites.
Mm-hmm.
I know you like throwing that 3/4 though, Gabe.
Oh, I do. Yeah.
I have
I like. I just did a video. I was throwing a 3/4 ounce spinnerbait with a size 7 Colorado blade on there in this muddy water. It was like 44-degree water, and there's times when they will blast that thing in the winter. You think it's too cold for spinnerbait, but they'll hit it. I mean, I've caught them down to like 41. 41's kind of my cutoff, and usually that 41 is coming out of winter and into the spring versus
warming trend
all into the winter on that kind of that early pre-spawn mode. Sometimes there'll be some days where they kind of slide up there and just kind of sun themselves on those really cold days, and you can throw that big something you can really slow roll, and you can catch some really big fish. You probably won't catch a lot, but you can catch some of the bigger fish in the lake that are up there just kind of relaxing and trying to do a little sun tanning.
That story I was telling you about when Gene and I was at Lake of the Ozarks, and we made spinnerbaits for the first time that night in the hotel room. It was a 3/4 ounce spinnerbait with a number 3 Colorado and a number 7 Willow. And that was the first time I had ever thrown a number 7 Willow.
That's a big blade.
And I learned that, man, that thing's the bomb at Lake of the Ozarks.
It's the bomb around here too. I love it.
I love it, man. You watch that rod tip's just doing that, and you'll feel that blade change, and you know something came up behind her and sucked it in.
Well, on those big blades, it's kind of like throwing a chatterbait. You can feel that fish draft it. He gets behind it and he takes water off of it.
Yeah.
And you're about to get, it's about to either go slack and you better start jerking, or it's going to go thunk and it's going to stop.
Exactly.
Here's a comment here, something to think about. Big Mike says, in his opinion, the trailer helps the bass suck the bait in. What do you think about that, Keith?
True. In early spring, when the water's still, anytime the water's in the 50s or lower, I put a trailer on there because it bulks the bait up, it slows it down, and like you said, Mike, I think it helps the fish, hold on to it a little bit longer. And
what's your trailer of choice in that situation?
Oh gosh, I mean, I like the Zoom and the Yum split tail trailer. I like, just a big old Mr. Twister curly tail.
Yeah.
I've got old white and chartreuse curly tail Mr. Twisters out here in a package. I got a box of them that's probably 30 years old. I don't even know if you can get them anymore. But yeah, anything along that lines, and a lot of these paddle tail swim baits, a guy you know, that they use those a lot now too.
That's my go-to, Keith. I throw a big 5-inch swim bait. I actually throw that Berkeley grass pig because it's a kind of it's a little bit stiffer swim bait, so it doesn't have a lot of action. I think if you throw a Kitech or something that's really got a lot of tail action, it might be too much for them. But that stiffer grass pig, it kind of drags and creates a little bit of lift, and of course you get like a really big profile. And that's just been something I kind of started fishing that about 6-7 years ago. That's that specific or that particular swim bait in the cold water. And you know, I'm one of those people that if I find something that works, I usually just kind of stick with it. I don't really, you know, we're solving problems and putting pieces of the puzzle together all the time. When I put a little piece in there, that's kind of what I stay with. That's my piece to that certain situation. I roll with it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I love showing up to a tournament and only having 1 or 2 rods laying out on the deck.
Oh yeah. That's the guy you got to be scared of. The guy that's got 2 rods on the deck. He's thrown this question out there twice. What's your favorite trailer for an inline spinner? Which is something I don't fish anymore. I used to, and I need to, especially. So here's a scenario that somebody brought up. I think this was on a live stream. We were talking about in the fall where you get fish schooling. They're actually blowing up and they're busting shad, and a lot of times they're feeding on the young of the year shad. You know, those shad will spawn in May or June, and then you've got a lot of smaller shad in the system. Of course, there's always adult shad, but a lot of times in the fall, you'll find a lot of those smaller shad, and it's hard to find a bait that represents that size of shad. And a lot of times they're super particular about what they're feeding on. They get locked in. It becomes like a match the hatch type of deal where you have to present something that's really exact size. And it's like hard to find something that will work. And somebody was talking about like an old rooster tail or an inline spinner, you know, just like a 6-ounce or an 1/8-ounce rooster tail. And I'm like, I should have known that.
Yeah. And when I think of inline spinners, you know, rooster tail and Meps are the only 2 that come to mind. And by you talking about that shad spawn deal right now, I'm sitting here wondering why on earth didn't I throw a inline Mep spinnerbait in conditions like that before? You know, because it already had the little bait fish on it, and the rooster tail had the bucktail. But yeah,
how about a Snagless Sally?
I have them. I've never thrown them. I don't get to fish grass very often.
Right.
But I do have them.
I think Meps I think they got one called the Comet that's got a little hard plastic minnow on the back of it instead of the bucktail, if I remember right. Yeah. So that's a no-brainer. We got to put those in the boat.
That's absolutely what it's called, Gabe. It's a Meps Comet minnow inline spinner.
Yep. That might be an awesome shad spawn bait right there. We might have learned something tonight.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those deals where, for me personally, I forget about it until they're blowing up, and I need it. You know, it's like,
well, when they're blowing up and you still can't get them to bite, right?
Yeah,
which is a lot of the time.
But you know, I mean, we had an excellent shaky head, that little heavy finesse jig that Andy Morgan designed for us. We sold tons of those, and that's still my favorite finesse jig today. You know, Andy came to us and he said, man, I need a finesse jig with some shoulders on it. You know, he said, these guys, you know, these finesse jigs, they've got light wire hooks. They're using them on 10 and 12 pound line, you know, which is great. They catch fish. People won tons of tournaments on them. But he said, you know, I want to fish it in heavy cover with 15 to 20 pound line. And so we made him one, and we put a 3/0 Gamakatsu flipping hook in it. And, you know, it was a very successful product for us.
Yeah, that's a popular jig. How did you how'd you decide to go with that spider cut? I always wonder where that came from.
You know, on a finesse bait, I just always liked it. I like the profile of it.
Do you remember somebody like coming up with that design? Like, was there somebody back in the day that, like the first person that came up with that kind of haircut on the jig?
The first jig that I remember for it, and I imagine Gail Julian could probably answer this without hesitation, but that Akins jig that he made, I believe had the little half skirt on it, and, you know, was probably the first true finesse jig that we ever had around here anyway.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's a full skirt just pulled down, basically?
No, it's truly a half a skirt.
Okay.
When we would order them, that's what they were called, half skirts. And yeah, it's a little finesse jig half skirts, what they called it.
Man, it's a fish catcher.
It is.
Any one of these.
Yeah.
I know Gail was telling me he's been on the live stream a couple times, and we were talking about jig colors and stuff, and like the peanut butter and jelly. I think he said that was somebody. I want to say his uncle designed that color, or somebody designed that color back in the day. I think, if I remember right, and maybe you would know this, Keith, but I thought he said that Jewel was like the first one to come out with that color a long time ago. Could be wrong.
As far as I know, they are, you know, and don't ask me why, but it is still today one of the most popular colors in a jig, especially a football jig.
Mm-hmm.
And I know around here and at Table Rock, to me, in a football jig, that's the only color you need.
Yeah. But you can't just buy one color. They're too pretty. Like that
Oh,
one right
no.
there. That's
No.
good. I like that one. Yeah, there is something about these finesse jigs that gets bites. I mean, any time of the year, but right now for sure. Like if I was going to go throw a jig, I'd be throwing a little finesse jig like this.
Absolutely.
They just get bites.
And our jigging spoon, you know, on these on the White River chain of lakes, you know, a jigging spoon is a big player in the fall.
Oh yeah.
And winter. And you know, I would buy a spoon. You know, I would have to swivel up my line, then tie the bait, you know, to a leader to keep your line from twisting and stuff. So we designed the spoon with a built-in swivel. I like having things where you can take it right out of the package and fish it, you know, so you didn't have to modify it. So that's how we come up with the swivel already attached to the spoon, ready to fish.
I mean, I bought some of these jigging spoons just for that reason, because it already had a swivel on it. You know, it's one less thing you got to mess with.
Yeah, one less thing you have to mess with.
That's one thing that's so nice about that War Eagle spinnerbait is you didn't have to do anything to it out of the package. It was
nope.
There was no in it. There was it ran true, and you could, like you said in the beginning of this conversation, you could burn it.
Yes, you can.
What's the best-selling spoon color? Is white, probably.
You know, nickel is probably the number one. White is real popular around here, and is probably the number two seller.
Yeah.
We sold a few gold spoons. Some of the shad-colored spoons, you know, would sell good in the southeast in those blue herring lakes. But yeah, nickel and white were the two best sellers, without a doubt.
Comes with a Gamakatsu hook too.
It did.
It's a good hook. So when did you decide? So you started out with spinnerbaits. When did you start transitioning into some other products? Because like you said, you got a jig, you got a spoon. When did that kind of start happening?
Shortly after, you know, maybe a couple of years after we got set up with KG, you know, it gave us a little more freedom to start adding to our product line. And, you know, that's one thing that, you know, I really enjoyed about it was, you know, coming up with new baits and adding to the product line. And you know, I tell people, you know, after the first 2 years, you know, I only worked half days, you know, 12 hours a day. That's a half a day. And, you know, I got to spend a little bit more time trying to come up with new ideas and stuff. But yeah, we get a lot. We had a lot of compliments on our spoon.
Did you fish the other half of the day then, I guess?
No,
Sleep sometime.
yeah, I kind of had to eat and sleep some.
Here you go. Hey, Fred wants to know, as a co-angler, how do you choose how many and what color to take as far as
Boy.
spinnerbait? Well, I mean, you got to have a white and chartreuse with a gold and silver. I go double willow leaf, gold and silver, because that's going to cover, you know, any kind of stain water. Say, I mean, 3 foot of visibility or less. That's a great color. Maybe even 4 foot if you got some wind and some cloud cover. So you kind of got that. I would say, I mean, a half ounce, 1 3/8, 1/2 ounce in a white and chartreuse, and then you need a clear, more of a clear watercolor, which you know, the mouse is a good clear watercolor. That you know, that kind of shad, kind of a purple glimmer type of color is a really good one. But I personally, and this is just my opinion, Keith, but I like a gold and a silver combined. Just about any situation that seems to be, it puts off a good flash combination in just about any water condition and cloud condition for me. So
especially as a co-angler, I mean, you're looking for a good combo, and I think you just hit the nail on the head there, Gabe. Right? Like,
yeah,
white and chartreuse, mouse, blue glimmer.
And also as a co-angler, you know, you guys are right. He doesn't know if he's going to get to fish dirty water or clear water.
Right.
So, you know, he's got to be packed, ready to fish wherever the boater takes him.
Absolutely. And you don't have to have the three-quarter ounce thumper and the quarter ounce. I mean, 3/8, half. You're gonna get, if they're biting a spinnerbait, you're gonna get bit.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, this right here, this color here is called blue herring shad. I've had some pretty good success with that and the purple shad in, you know, 4 to 6 foot of visibility. But I would say, you know, any of these kind of somewhat translucent skirt colors will get you through it. And the mouse too. The mouse is a good, I know it's a little bit bolder, but that's a really good clear watercolor. That works in pretty much all, you know, all conditions.
Yeah, I really liked, even in the clear water, you know, I like throwing the mouse on a cloudy day because it is a little darker and it throws a better silhouette, you know. Yeah, on a cloudy day, mouse was my go-to color in clear water.
I think that, go back to that mouse, Gabe. It's not that bold.
No.
In real life, I was looking at that. I'm like, man, that doesn't seem right. It seems like it's a lot darker in that picture than it truly is, and it's not. Like, that's
no, that doesn't even look like it, really, honestly.
No, that's got too much. Looks like it's almost got too much brown in it.
Yeah, it looks a lot different in person. But yeah, that'd be my suggestion. Is Fred, is just to get a chartreuse and white and a 3/8 and a half, and then just pick one of those, you know, those, like the mouse or those clear colors, and you should be good. I mean, for most of the time you can catch them. And I mean, if you get really, really dirty water, that, like Keith was saying, that coleslaw with the painted blade, I've caught a lot of fish. You know, JB knows the tournament I found out about the painted blades. I was fishing a BFL on Kentucky Lake, and we ran into Barkley, and it was early springtime, and we fished in Eddy Creek in the back, and it was chocolate milk. I mean, it was like 6 inches of visibility, and we were throwing a spinnerbait. It was a half-ounce spinnerbait. It was a white and chartreuse with 1 white and 1 chartreuse blade, and I had like almost 17 pounds, and the other guy in the boat had almost 22 or 23, and they all came on that spinnerbait. So that was
4 fish too.
Yeah, I had 4 fish for almost 17, but that was the day where I'm like, okay, there's something to these painted blades and this big gaudy looking spinnerbait, but you got to have the right conditions to throw it.
Yeah.
Well, and you start adding like a big blade, a big painted blade in muddy water. Then you start looking for that above average bite at that point.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
We needed to have this show like a month and a half from now, because I am jonesing to go throw a spinnerbait somewhere. So
yeah. I hope in a couple of weeks I get to throw one down in Texas.
Down in Texas? What are we fishing down in Texas?
I'm going to get to fish the Open this year down at Rayburn.
Okay. Are you fishing a full circuit or?
Yeah. I'm going to fish all 4 of them in Division 2.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
And I would assume the goal there is to qualify.
You know, guys, I mean, I'm old, you know, I'm 64 years old. I got 6 screws in my lower back and a titanium left hip. I do it because I love it, you know. Sure, I love the competition. What I would really like to do is just to get lucky and win one to get to go to the big show. If I qualified,
either, would it?
If I qualified for the elites, I don't have any idea how I could fish them, but I would cross that bridge if it happened. But no, I just do it because, you know, I like the competition. I've never got to fish much on different lakes. I want to fish different lakes, and you know, I love the Opens format, to where if you do win one and you've fished all the tournaments in your division, you get to go to the Classic. I mean, you know, that's the carrot that they dangle, you know. And but yeah, I'm just looking forward to having the opportunity to do it. You know, it's something I've wanted to do my whole life, and I wish I could have done it when I was a lot younger. But you know, you take what's handed to you, and now's the time I've got the opportunity to do it.
Well, and, I mean, I'm pulling for you. I want to see you whoop up on some of these young kids. I want an old spinnerbait and beating the banks a little bit.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Big Mike was saying, as a co-angler, you do need a 1/4 ounce. I appreciate that, Mike. You're exactly right. You do need a 1/4 ounce. That 1/4 ounce is just something you can float. You can float it around stuff a little easier. You know, if you got a
too, right? Like,
you're gonna get some bites, and that's the deal with fishing out of the back of the boat. You're looking for keepers. You know, you're looking for just keeper bites.
And I always had that. I tell you what, if I knew it was a springtime bite when I was fishing co-angler, I can promise you I had that. It was back then it was the get 5 quick, but I think it's that finesse spinnerbait that Big Mike was talking about a while ago. I always had one of those tied on.
Yeah, that little bait and that 1/4 ounce bait will definitely get you bites behind somebody throwing a bigger bait at times. Mm-hmm. Definitely. Good point, Mike.
Yeah, JP says he throws a 1/4 ounce spinnerbait a lot as a co. Yeah, and I've seen like a chatterbait. There's times when a little 1/8 ounce chatterbait will catch fish really, really shallow. I've saw that. I've been throwing like a 3/8 ounce or something. I was fishing a team tournament with my buddy Jerry, and we were way back. We were in Pomona, Jonathan. We were all the way in the back of Pomona there that you see coming. You know, you drive out on the road back in there, just shallow. It's just a dead end creek that's all silted in back there, and I was throwing a 3/8 ounce. It's just what I had on, and he had a little 1/8 ounce chatterbait, and he started whacking them back there.
It's too silted in. There ain't no fish back there anymore.
Yeah, right. There were that day. We caught a bunch of fish back there, but they wouldn't hit that bigger chatterbait. They wanted something moving a lot slower and a lot smaller profile.
I know I need to throw a chatterbait more often. I don't have a lot of time with one, but it's going to be in my arsenal this year for sure.
You know, you say that, Keith. I mean, I've went back to throwing a spinnerbait.
Yeah.
I threw, and don't get me wrong, I love a good chatterbait bite. Like there's not a lot that's better than a good chatterbait bite when it's cold out. But throwing that big spinnerbait, when they're on that spinnerbait, I'll throw a spinnerbait over a chatterbait most days.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Here's a personal question from Mr. Travis Harriman. He says, "When's the last time Keith has caught one off the point at Beaver?"
Oh gosh. If it's the point I think he's talking about, the one I sat on all day long that he was wanting to get on. It's been a while, Travis, and it's been a long time since I've caught a keeper off of it. I know last summer, one of the tournaments, I was able to run right to it, and I got on it. And on the first cast, I caught a gar about as long as my leg. And then after that, I probably caught 12 or 15 shorts off of it. I don't think I ever caught a keeper off of it that day. What'd you guys do to
it? You gotta keep trying it though every once in a while. I mean, it's like one of those spots where you've caught fish on in the past. It just kind of draws you over there. You got to make a few casts no matter what.
Yeah.
Big Mike's got another question. He says, "Why are people so scared to fish stained to dirty water?" He's fished on the Potomac River and it's always stained. Now, I would say there's a lot of people, and it's funny. I just had this conversation with somebody last week. We were talking, I can't remember what lake we were talking about, but they're scared to fish clear water. Like their home lake has got like 2 foot of visibility or less. And when they get in like clearer water, which is still like probably stained water, they feel like they can't get a bite. So I think it goes both ways, Mike. If you're used to fishing clear water all the time, you're scared of dirty. If you're used to fishing dirty, you're scared of clear.
I think the other thing is, what's your definition of dirty or stained water? I remember the fishing down at Kentucky Lake and drew out with a guy, and I asked him that night before, is it too dirty? It was early in the year, so is it too dirty to throw a jerkbait? And he's like, "Oh man, it's blown out. You can't throw a jerkbait." And we get there, and it's like 2.5 foot visibility. I'm like,
perfect.
What do you think is blown out, bud? Because 2.5 foot of visibility is plenty for me. I'm good.
Yeah. No, I prefer the stained water myself.
Yeah.
I like to fish shallow. I like to be turning the reel handle on something.
Ted's got a question. What's up, Ted? Good to see you on here. What's your favorite lake to fish and why, Keith?
Oh, I mean, I'm blessed to be right here where I'm at. I'm an hour from Grand Lake, an hour from Table Rock. Beaver is my home lake, and yes, it is a tough fishery, but it's been very good to us over the years. And I like bull shows. 2 years ago was the first time that I've ever got to go to Toledo Bend, and I loved it. I mean, I could probably move down there, and live in between Toledo Bend and Sam Rayburn. I mean, I think, they're 8 or 9 hours away from here, but I think those are probably 2 of the best fisheries we have in the country. And I don't have a lot of experience fishing grass and hydrilla, but those 2 lakes have both. Toledo Bend has a lot of standing timber in it, as you know. But yeah, I was taken back with Toledo Bend. I really liked it.
Yeah. Just an interesting fact. I know we were talking last night, Keith, or actually you texted me today about Jim DeRosa and the radio show that been on before. That was my buddy Ron's uncle. His Uncle Jim had that radio show, and it's such a small world because Keith and I were on here last night just doing kind of a test drive or test run, and we got to talking about Mille Lacs and how I went up there and fished with Ron. We call him Uncle Ron on the show here, and I kind of had the most phenomenal fishing experience, especially for smallmouth, that I'd ever experienced in my life. It was just unbelievable. And then Keith was telling me about a radio show, and anyway, come to find out that Ron's Uncle Jim had a radio show for a long, long time, and Keith was a guest on it. Ron's been a guest on it because after we were talking and you told me his name, I texted Ron, and sure enough, that's who it was. So,
yeah.
But I would say to answer that question, Ted, as far as my favorite lake and you know why, I had a lot of fun on Mille Lacs. I really did. It was it's kind of like when you go on vacation. It's hard to separate the vacation from the reality of life if you were to actually live in the area, because there's been so many times where I go to Colorado and I'm like, I want to move to Colorado. Well, you're on vacation. To really get the true feel and experience, you have to be working in that same area. And vacation, it counts, but it doesn't really count because that's not what you're going to be doing when you move there. You're not going to be on vacation. You're going to be working. But I don't know that I would move up there because of the winters. I mean, right now, Mille Lacs has probably got 2 feet of ice on it. It's not uncommon for it to get 2 to 2.5, 3 foot of ice. And they have a whole ice fishing culture up there, which is something else that I learned when I was up there. We stayed at a guy named Jason Shoddy had a house up there. And when I pulled up, it was late at night. I got up the next day, and in his driveway, there's actually two like pull behind travel trailers, like a 31-foot trailer. And they pull those suckers out on the ice. And we went in there. You get in, they got it rough, let me tell you. So they got a fireplace, they got a 42-inch flat screen TV, and they've got in the floor of this trailer, they've got looks like about 12-inch caps that they unscrew. They drill a hole in the ice, and they sit in the living room with a fireplace and TV, and they ice fish. So it's a big culture. They actually guide. They have ice fishing guides and stuff. So when the water gets hard, they keep on fishing up there. So that's kind of cool. But I don't
that sounds more like drinking to me.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of adult beverages and that kind of stuff going on too. But as far as when it's the open water fishing, yeah, it was phenomenal. So I would almost say that's based on that experience that I had hanging out with Ron up there and going out to eat at this place called it's called the Spotlight Cafe, but we called it the Spotlight Cafe. And we'd go there every morning and get breakfast and just go fish all day long for smallmouth. And I think we did that for 5 or 6 days. So, right now that would be my favorite lake. And that's the reason why. Jonathan, you got a favorite lake?
Man, I haven't traveled as much as I'd like to, but Chickamauga was a lot of fun. Bull Shoals is a lot of fun.
Bull's fun too, definitely.
A bull, I think kind of like you talk about vacation. Like, I can't say my home lake. I know my home lake and I can go out there and pretty well catch fish every time you go out there. But the vacation lakes are the ones that you remember, the ones that you could see yourself going and fishing more often. And Bull was one of those for me. Bull was a lot of fun, and I think a lot of it's because it's 180 degrees opposite of what we do. We're shallow grass, mud, silt, catching them like that, where down there at Bull, you're catching them in 100 foot of water. So
yeah,
we haven't made it down in the spring yet, which I'm curious to do that and catch them in the flooded bushes. I hear that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
What I love about Bull Shoals is you can go over there sometimes, even if it's in the spring of the year, and you might fish all day long and see 2 or 3 other boats if you get to go through the week. It's just, it doesn't get the pressure that Table Rock and Beaver gets. It's pleasant to go over there, just due to the lack of boat traffic.
Well, I know Dell was telling us it was a holiday weekend, and they had a tournament, and they were coming back, and it was like 3:00 in the afternoon on a Sunday, and he saw like 5 boats on the way back to the ramp. They put it at one ramp, and where the weigh-in was at another ramp, and they were driving back. And he said it wasn't like the most beautiful day in the world, but still to only see a handful of boats on a holiday weekend,
Yeah,
that's insane.
Meanwhile, Lake of the Ozarks, that's another story.
Yeah, you take your life in your own hands at Lake of the Ozarks on a holiday.
That thing gets rough.
It does. It's a monster.
It almost makes me, Gabe, you and I have talked about it, but like thinking about just dragging our little boats down there and fishing.
You could, but I mean, it'd take you so long to get anywhere. It's a big lake. It's 55,000 acres, I believe. Of course, I mean, you can go right across from the boat dock and catch some fish back in that creek over there.
Right.
C. Clark says, I think Keith's fishing partner gets weak in the knees in that clear water. I don't know if he's talking about Nikki or.
He must be talking about Nikki. Yeah. Yeah. And Nikki likes the dirty water as much as I do, probably more. The clear water doesn't scare me if conditions are right. If you've got to have wind. I think wind is most important. Clouds and wind is icing on the cake. But yeah, no, I prefer to be in the dirty water. And that's one thing. I was very blessed to get to team fish for 9 years with Gene Vandiver. He's still. I've never got to fish with anyone that could make on the water decisions like he could. I mean, there would be some mornings we'd be sitting out here at Prairie Creek waiting for them to call our boat number, and our plan was to go down by the dam to Big Clifty or something. And before they even called our boat number, Gene would say, we need to scrap our plan. Let's put all this stuff away. We're going under the bridge. And I'd say, what? Or vice versa. If we were planning on making a long run up in the river, he might say, we need to change our plans. We need to go to dam. Really? Okay. But yeah, it's the clear water. Before I'll go down there, I've got to have the conditions.
Yeah, it is. It's that when you fish with somebody that's got those, they got gills, they get that fishy intuition. It's pretty cool to see it happen.
Yeah.
Jim's got another question. He says, what's your biggest fish you caught on a spinnerbait and on what lake?
Oh, goodness. Probably in the 7-pound class, and more than one of them on beaver, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a good, that's a really good one.
Yeah, I've caught several 7-pounders on spinnerbait on beaver, probably a handful on Table Rock. I think that trip I took to Toledo Bend, I think we had some 6 and 7-pounders on spinnerbaits one day. But yeah, I've never caught a fish over 10 pounds. I caught one on beaver one time. It was the last weekend in February, and I was practicing for a Central Pro-Am tournament before it went off limits the following week. And I had the most incredible day of fishing I've ever had. I probably had 4 or 5 fish in the 5-pound class, a couple over 6. I had one that weighed 7.9 and one that weighed 9.4. And I caught those 2 biggest ones, and I said, this was back before cell phones. I said, man, I got to weigh these. And so I put those 2 biggest ones in the live well, and I ran back down to Rocky Branch Marina. I didn't even know if they were going to be open because it was middle of winter, and sure enough, they were open. And I asked the guy if he had any scales, and he said, yeah, I've got certified meat scales in here. And so we weighed both those fish. The big one weighed 9.4, the other one weighed 7.5. And he said, do you want me to take your picture? And I said, you've got a camera? And he had a Polaroid camera. And he took 2 Polaroids, and he gave me one of them, and he sent the other one into the newspaper. So 9.4 on a jerk bait, an old Smithwick Rogue, is the biggest bass that I've ever caught.
Dang. Wow.
Out of the cedar tree. And that was in 1990.
There's one right there.
That's one right there. Yes, sir.
Clown color. It's a good one. It's time to throw that one right now, too. Colder the water, the better that sucker works.
It sure is.
Huh.
Yeah.
Here's another question. It says, Keith, what's one tip that you've learned that will never change in bass fishing's future? That's an interesting question.
That is a really good question.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever heard that one.
Well, this is not going to be my answer, but I want to tell you that I asked a guy a very similar question that one time. I was standing in the weigh-in line at Lake Mead in 1986 at the tank with my fish, and a guy come up behind me and put his fish in the tank and threw water all over me, and I turned around and looked, and it was Roland Martin. And I said, Mr. Martin, have you got any tips that you would give a young angler? And he said, tip? Yeah, I'll give you a tip. He said, go early and stay late. And
can't argue with that.
But no, the best tip that I could give somebody, man, enjoy the time you're on the water. I mean, we're blessed to be living in a country where we can go do this, and just enjoy the time you're on the water. Catching fish is just icing on the cake, and one thing that I always try to do when I go fishing is I try to learn something. I try to learn what the fish are doing for that particular day and trying to figure out how to catch them. But the best tip I could give you is spend time on the water.
Yeah.
You as you were saying that, the first person that came in my mind was Chris Johnson. He just said yes. He had that message, and he preached that message loud last week, and it was just, go fishing. I don't care how you catch them. If you catch them under a bobber and a cricket, or you catch them out over 100 foot of water with live scope, as long as you're enjoying it, who cares? Yeah.
And I'm trying. I really am. I'm trying real hard to learn as much as I can about this forward-facing sonar. But when I go out here on my home lake, I'll dedicate my time to that. But man, if that wind gets up and starts blowing, I start thinking, man, I could run all these points on the left side of the lake from here at the dam, throwing a spinnerbait or a crankbait and have some fun. I go do it, because I want to catch fish. And but yeah, just enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think we talked about this. If I got the opportunity to catch them covered in water, power fishing shallow, I'm definitely going to take advantage of it, because that just brings me joy. I mean, I like catch them however, people, you always hear what's your favorite way to catch a fish, and I'm like, most of the time it's just however the fish are biting, whatever bait I can catch them on, I'm usually pretty happy. It may take me a couple bites to get away from what I want to be catching them on, but eventually what I'm catching them on usually becomes you know, my favorite way to catch them at that given moment. But there are certain things that I go looking for, and if the conditions present itself, I'm definitely going to jump on it and get after it.
Yeah, and one other tip, you know, that may be good, it may be bad, but I've always learned that if all else fails, you just go fish your strengths, you know.
Right.
And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But that is probably the one tip that has stuck with me over the years, to fish your strengths.
What would you, if you could fish? I've asked this question before, but if you could fish any lure for like 2 hours, and the fish were going to bite it, like you could just tie it on. Doesn't matter what time of the year, doesn't matter what lake. You go out and you throw it, and the fish just absolutely crush it. What would you tie on?
Oh, of course, it'd be a spinnerbait. I mean, I love throwing a spinnerbait. I love the bite on a spinnerbait, but you know, I'm also the same way. And I'm probably bad about doing this to fault. You know, there's days, you know, I may pick up a wiggle wart and never lay it down, you know, or a jerk bait. You know, if all else fails, I love picking that little jig up and, you know, pitching it on channel swings all day long if I want to get bit.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I love throwing a spinnerbait. I mean, it's just, I don't know, you know, it's a reaction strike. It's you know, you can fish it in so many different levels of the water column. I love throwing a spinnerbait.
I'll give you a little tip here about a spinnerbait that I've been hearing over the last couple of years. There's been a big, it's been a controversial topic is forward-facing sonar, live scope, and co-anglers. And, you know, there's been a lot of co-anglers complaining about getting, you know, front-ended, back-boated, whatever you want to call it, by people that are live scoping, lining up on, you know, specific pieces of cover and throwing at a fish. And I've been in that situation multiple times, and it is tough. But I've also heard a couple times about, this is people out there that are co-anglers. I'm giving you a little nugget here. I haven't actually did this yet, but I've heard of people doing this and having success, is throwing while your boater is live scoping, throwing a little minnow or jerkbait or whatever she's doing up there, throwing, just fan casting a spinnerbait, just a 3/8 ounce spinnerbait around, and just casting it, even if you're out, you know, out off the bank or whatever, on like a flat, like a shoal or a bar or something on Kentucky Lake, wherever you're at, Pickwick, throwing a spinnerbait and reeling it in. I was fishing with Ed Geddes down on Pickwick last fall, and he was talking about he was even targeting brush piles with the spinnerbait using forward-facing sonar, and his co-angler was catching fish out of the back of his boat with a spinnerbait, blind casting. So, and I've heard this like 3 or 4 times over the last couple of years of somebody in the back of the boat just fan casting a spinnerbait. So that's something I'm going to try, you know, if I'm ever in a situation where the guy in the front of the boat is just really, you know, scoping.
Right.
So I don't know that like I said, I haven't personally experienced that, but I've heard it enough times. And when you kind of start hearing, you know, that kind of stuff from different people, there's got to be some truth to it. It becomes, sometimes it's not just doc talk, you know, sometimes it's a little bit more credible than doc talk.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, you know, one thing that, you know, live scope has shown me is, even though you're out there in the middle of nowhere, those fish, a lot of them that these guys are catching, they're not that deep, you know.
Right.
And so why wouldn't they rush up and bite a spinnerbait if you throw it over them?
And they're not seeing that all that much.
Yeah.
They're seeing a jerkbait, they're seeing a minnow a lot.
Yeah.
But they're not seeing a spinnerbait, and we all know bass love spinnerbaits.
Yes, they do.
A couple more questions here. What is there a bait that is a forgotten bait, like something that used to be popular that jumps out, something you used to see a lot more commonly, and it seems like people have kind of just forgotten about it. I mean, I know, when the chatterbait came out, people kind of got away from the spinnerbait, so you can, spinnerbait kind of fell off the map a little bit. I mean, people that diehard spinnerbait fishermen, we always got one tied on, but is there any other baits that you could think of that used to be really popular and now you don't really hear a whole lot about them anymore?
Well, I mean, over the years, so many baits have evolved. Like, when I started, fishing and being on this White River chain of lakes, you had to learn how to throw a jerkbait. I mean, you had to be a good jerkbait fisherman. And, when I started, all we had was a Smithwick Rogue, Well, then Lucky Craft came out with Pointer 100, and there was a time there, they dominated, and you never heard any more about the Rogue. And then there was a time when Megabass came out, and all of a sudden you didn't hear any more about a Pointer 100. It was all Megabass.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as one specific lure, I mean, when I was a kid sitting in front of the TV watching Bassmasters, a jig and frog was popular, like a flipping jig with a pork chunk on it.
Yeah, right.
And, to me, that's something you don't hear about very often anymore.
Ron throws that pork frog. That's why I pulled it. He got me.
How about you? Yeah. How about you guys? Is there a lure that you think has disappeared off the charts?
I always think of, it's not necessarily a lure, but it's like a color. Back years ago, when I very first started fishing, there was I'm trying to think of, it might have been Mann's, it might have been Culprit. I can't remember. But there was a purple worm with the fire tail. And I remember the fire tail was like the deal for several years, and you don't see it anymore. Like if you pull up Baitworks website or whatever site you shop at, or you go in Bass Pro Shops, it's I'm not saying they're not in there, but it's not right out there on the front peg there. They're hard to find. That was the deal for a long time, that old purple with that fire tail.
I remember that. Yeah, I think Cream had one, and I remember those.
How about a red shad worm?
The red shad's not as popular as it used to be either. I don't know why. Motor oil, that was a popular color. That's, you don't hear much about.
Well, we've mentioned a lot of baits here, and you think about it, like, how many options did we have 20 years ago? How many options did we have 10 years ago? How many options did we have 5 years ago?
True.
I mean, how many colors we talk about Zoom? How many colors does Zoom Bait Company have? I mean, just an astronomical amount.
Yeah.
So, and we all talk about simplifying our tackle box, but yet everybody keeps coming up with something new. I build my own jigs, and I have like 4 colors of jigs, and that's it. And I make 4 colors. I don't make any fancy colors. I have all the other colors, but when I buy it, I buy brown skirt material, I buy black skirt material, I buy blue skirt material. It's pretty dang simple what I do. But yeah, you talk about all the different baits that are forgotten about. A lot of them are forgotten about because there's something that's either replaced it, like going from a Rogue to a Pointer to a Vision 110 to all the other ones that are out there now. That's a pain in the butt to throw in a 20-mile-an-hour wind.
The old Rogue, yeah.
There's a reason that Pointer threw so much better than this one, and then there's a reason that Megabass works so well. Like, it just throws better.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that'll make you throw it on a spinning rod a lot of times.
Right.
get out there on a windy day and try to throw a rogue around. Although they don't throw as bad as what I thought. I think part of it, they're not as good as some of the newer technology because they don't have the same weight transfer system. But I think part of it was back in the day, I just probably didn't have as good equipment as far as the bait casters and stuff are better nowadays. And I wasn't as good. I didn't have as educated of a thumb, so they, I fished a rogue. I broke out. I did a video on that about 4 years ago. I kind of broke some out, and I was expecting them to cast worse than they actually did. Now I did get some backlashes. They do kind of fluff up in the wind. But I thought they would be worse than they actually were. But you're right. Technology sometimes, they build a better mousetrap. So some of that stuff that used to be the only one in that category is kind of goes by the wayside. But that rogue, man.
We talk about all that, and one thing that hasn't really gone away. I mean, it comes and goes, but it's a spinnerbait.
Yeah.
I mean, colors change, but that War Eagle spinnerbait's been the same for 20 plus years.
Yeah. Oh, I tell you what. I mean, I was still in the industry twice. The whole time I was in the business, there was really only 2 innovative lures that were real game changers that I really thought would hurt the spinnerbait business. And that was the chatterbait and the Alabama rig. When those 2 baits come out, people would call me up and say, "How are you ever going to sell another spinnerbait?" Well, we did. But I mean, I was in the industry for a long time, and those 2 lures are really the only innovative lures that come to mind that I seen during that time period. But,
yeah, you're right. Now I think about it, like 2 of the most influential lures.
Yeah,
had to be the A-rig and the bladed jig.
Yeah.
And I remember when I fished with a guy on Kentucky Lake, and somebody had made him a bladed jig because Z-Man had that patent, and this guy was selling them out of his house, and the guy I fished with had one, and at that time the blade was different. It was like a surfboard type of blade, and he actually had a couple holes punched in the blade. It was a little bit different looking blade, but between the time that I fished with him and the next time I spoke with him, and it was only a couple months, the guy that was making and selling those had already got kind of a cease and desist letter from Z-Man telling him to cut that crap out, that he couldn't sell a bait that had the blade attached to the actual jig head.
Yeah.
And so you started seeing people put a split ring to kind of change it. But they knew what they had. When they come out with that design, they knew what they had. They were smart enough to put a patent on it and kind of keep it under control for quite a while.
Well, you think about you talk about the A-rig. Think about the A-rig craze. I was buying A-rigs off of eBay from whoever I could find them, making out of coat hangers, whatever.
Everybody was making those things.
Yeah.
And selling them for whatever they wanted to there for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ron says a little George. That's one I keep.
I bought a couple of them a couple years ago.
I know I got some that I need to start throwing again because I know that sucker will work. It's just something different. And you were also asking, Ron. I saw you say something up here. Do the boaters leave side scan on the back of the boat for the co-anglers? Sometimes. It just depends on the person.
50-50 for what my experience.
Yeah, 50-50. I say, there's more guys going with lithium batteries. So they have a tendency to just leave the graph on because they're not worried about battery power. I know I still got the habit of putting my graph on standby just to reserve the battery capacity. And I think that's probably one of the reasons, but there's still guys that don't want you to know, which side of the boat's the deep side, which side's the shallow side, and where the creek channel is. But I'd say 75% of the guys are pretty cool. They don't care if you see what's going on the
I
graph.
started putting my cover on my graph.
Huh?
I started putting my cover on my graph.
You did? Keep the sun off of it?
I swung off a fish with a 1 ounce tungsten weight, and I missed my graph by about that much.
Oh.
I was like, it's probably be all right. Just throw my cover on it every day. So,
yeah, no kidding. All right, we'll wrap this sucker up. Let's see. Anybody got any last minute questions on here? Get them on here, and we'll wind things down. I do got one more question though before we go. Keith,
Just
being on Beaver Lake and down there in Arkansas area, have you heard any Sasquatch stories? You got any experience with Sasquatch, or is there?
No, I mean, I have fished this lake probably as much as anyone since 1984 when I moved here, and 3 or 4 years ago, I had a first. I was in the back end of Little Clifty, and I was going down the bank 100 mile an hour throwing a whopper plopper, and I turned the corner and I went around the point and I fired a cast way down that bank, and something scared me to death. And he must have been just laying at the edge of the lake sleeping, but it was a black bear.
Wow.
And he jumped up, and instead of running away from me, he kind of ran at an angle toward me up the hill. And I mean, he was knocking down, you could hear limbs and trees snapping, and he was grunting. But that's the first bear that I've got to see on this lake. So that was kind of cool. He was moving too fast for me to get my phone out and film it. But yeah, that was pretty cool. But
Wow.
no Sasquatch stories now. I know a place in Toledo Bend where I seen one in a guy's yard. I mean, it was metal artwork, but he does have a Sasquatch in his yard.
Right, yeah. Well, I know when I was down there on bull shows, and I think Jonathan, we saw the same caves, but I was out there with Dell, and there's a couple of those random caves on the side of the hill that look like a spot where maybe a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot could be living back in one of those caves. So, and then with how remote it is out there, like we mentioned, how you can fish all day and not see a boat. And there's just not a lot of development. That if I was a Squatch, that'd be an area I might kind of hunker down and hang out at for a while.
That's right.
Are you seeing more bears down there? I mean, are you hearing of more bears in that area?
Oh yeah. Last year, I live just a couple of miles from the ramp at Prairie Creek here, and one night my phone rang, and it was my nearest neighbor, about a quarter mile down the road, called, and he said there was a bear that just run across the road in front of your house and went behind your boat barn. And I'd cleaned some crappie and threw the heads back there behind the boat barn. So I guess that's what he was going there. And even though I never did get to see that particular bear, several of the neighbors around here sent me pictures of him and videos of him. And I guess he got a little too friendly, and the Fish and Game came out and tranked him and took him to White Rock to turn loose. But yeah, I guess he got a little too friendly coming up on people's porches, and the Fish and Game talked to us about it and said, it was a 2-year-old male, and I guess when the male gets 2 years old, the mama bear kicks them out, but she lets them hang around for 2 years, and then she runs them off. And so I guess he was just trying to find a home.
Wow.
But yeah, there's getting to be more and more bears around here. I noticed 2 or 3 years ago, someone down by Rocky Branch filmed one right alongside their boat that was swimming across the lake. So
Wow.
yeah, that's pretty cool. Pretty cool. And that just goes back to my passion and love for fishing. When you're out there fishing and you see a bobcat crawling down the bank, or a fox out there still at daylight, that just makes it all better.
You're absolutely right. Like there's coves on the lake that we fish that are named after, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Called Bobcat because
You see a bobcat every time you're in that cove.
Yeah.
I'm always concerned about. I've got a little dog, and she goes fishing with me all the time. She weighs. Well, we thought she weighed 14.5 pounds because she hasn't been in the groomer in like 3 months, but I actually weighed her the other day and she only weighs 13.5 pounds. So we were being a little hard on her. But
Did
anyway,
you put her on
a
a Rapala scale or what?
No, I get on the scale and weigh myself, and then I pick her up and get on there, and then we do the Missouri math and we figure it out. But anyway, every time I'm over there at that lake, I'm always kind of concerned about a bobcat coming out of the woods and snatching her up. I put her on a leash and kind of tie her to the back of my boat, so she can't get too far away. But those bobcat, they're super, super sneaky, and they can get brave. I mean, they can be brave. They're not as brave as like a coyote, but if they're hungry enough and they think that they've got an opportunity, they have no problem coming out there and grabbing your dog. And then what are you going to do? I was just thinking, like, if you let your dog out to go to the bathroom and a coyote comes and grabs your dog, what are you going to do?
You're not fast enough.
You're not going to catch a coyote. I mean, he's going to take off. You're going to keep up with him for a couple hundred yards, and then you're going to be like one of them overweight cops on the cop TV reality show that he's good for about 50 yards, and then he's just
bad boys.
Exactly. So, we got a winner, Ted Ward. Congratulations, Ted. Hit me up on Facebook at Gabe Montgomery Fishing, 10 Horse Monty, or Instagram 10 Horse Monty 6, and I will get you a $25 regular gift card.
I would have started guessing. Jeez.
Yeah, I know. Let me see if we got any more questions before we wrap this up and get all the way here to the bottom.
I didn't see anything popping through.
Yeah. So when you taking off for the first open of the year, Keith?
Well, we was going to leave Saturday, February 8th, so we would be ready for the first day of practice. But as cold as it's been, and I haven't got to go out, I'm kind of getting cabin fever. So I think I'm going to leave a couple of days early and go down and fish Toledo Bend a couple of days before I head to Rayburn.
Yeah.
And just, try to get acclimated to the elements, and I'm about to climb the walls. I need to go fishing.
I know. I'm right there with you. I don't do good. I start getting kind of grumpy and just a little bit short with everybody. I got to get out on the water. Well, cool, man. That's good luck. Good luck with everything. I'll be kind of paying attention and following along.
Whip up on them young guns.
Yeah. Show them who's boss.
Man, like I say, I'm going to try to get the best that I can get at that. But, I'm old, guys. I don't have the reflexes those young guys have, I mean, I fished with Travis Harriman some, and he can see a fish out there 80 feet way over here, and just a flip of the wrist, he's on it. By the time I line up and figure out where I need to cast, that fish is already in the next county, Yeah. They're just better at it. And,
just don't need to worry about them, and go worry about them up on the bank and qualify.
That's right.
Go find some of that stained water.
That's right.
What's up, Michael? Michael's been catching them on Kentucky Lake. Let me get back down there. I was talking to Austin today. I got a boat coming from ACS Marine down there in Paris, and he's got a tournament Saturday on Kentucky Lake, and he's worried about Paris Landing being froze because it's just a marina, it's a cove, and water temperature's like 38 degrees down there. And
wow.
yeah,
wow.
They're worried about that getting kind of locked up.
Yeah, that's our second stop in the opens, and I haven't seen Kentucky Lake since the late 1980s.
Oh,
And January 9th, I believe it was, BAS has changed the rules, and I can't get any information at all about any of the lakes now, which is not much fun. But I guess I'll just show up there and cover as much water as I can and try to put something together.
there you go.
Yeah, that's we talked a little bit about that last night, Keith. That's unfortunate because
Yeah,
a lot of people were planning on, you know, getting some time in on some of those bodies of water for, you know, the official cutoff, and
yeah,
kind of took that out of the equation.
yeah.
But what are you going to do? Spilled milk, you know. There's no reason to cry over it.
Rules are rules.
Rules are rules. That's right. All right. Well, let's wrap this up. Any closing thoughts or, you know, shout outs or anything, Keith?
Just, like I said, selling War Eagle was a bittersweet decision at the time. But, God was definitely watching out for me because it sold just weeks, maybe a couple of months before the word COVID was even mentioned. And, I know a lot of small businesses like me that was in the fishing industry. COVID really put a hurt on them because they couldn't get components. And so everything happens for a reason. War Eagle is still going strong. They use the same components, the same suppliers that I used. And, they seem to be quite happy with it. And so, yeah, you know, like, like I was talking to Gerald Sundell one time, this was, back in the late 90s. And he was telling me about, the tournament lakes he was getting ready to go to and stuff. And he would say, well, my next lake is here. And I asked him, I said, is it a spinnerbait lake? And he said, brother, every lake I go to is a spinnerbait lake.
That's right. If you look hard enough, you can find them. Find a spinnerbait fish.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Was that one more question? I'm curious about how that went down as far as, you know, you built this company and things are coming along and you're growing and growing and you're thinking about expanding, and then next thing you know, you decide to sell. Is that so you weren't shopping that around?
Oh, no.
Did they just approach you, or?
Yeah, I just got approached,
Okay.
No, I had no intentions of selling it. And, I got a call one day and, they said, we want to buy you. And I said, well, I don't want to sell. And, but turns out I did. But,
Yeah.
And it was just like, back when the business was growing, I never once called on a major retailer. I dealt with independent retailers. I never called any of the major retailers. They called me. And
That's strong.
Well, you got a really good product when they reach out to you.
Yeah.
You're not trying to beat down their door; they're beating down your door.
Yeah.
Well, that was Gerald Swindle. That was Gerald Swindle out there doing all that marketing for you.
He was. I don't think he's with War Eagle any longer, but yeah, Gerald was a great ambassador for the company, as well as Mike and all the guys we had. Andy Morgan, even the guys we had over the years for just short times. That we were a small company. I couldn't pay these guys what these bigger companies were paying. And we've had a lot of good fishermen over the years that were with us that, would call up and say, man, I got a better offer. And I said, hey, you do this for a living. You got to do what you got to do. But no, it was a good experience. It was fun to see it grow. You know, you had to learn to take the lumps with the gravy. It wasn't easy, or everybody'd be doing it, but I was glad I had the opportunity to do it.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Man, thanks for coming on here, hanging out. Thanks for everybody out there in the chat. A lot of good questions. We do this every Tuesday night. And I want to let everybody know, I just got the podcast form of this going the other night. I spent the last couple of days getting the podcast uploaded to Spotify, and we're on iTunes and iHeartRadio. So if you guys want to watch this or listen to this in the podcast form, it's up and available. I'll have this posted probably by tomorrow. That's something that I had several requests for, because a lot of times we're driving through areas that don't have really good phone reception. And if you've got video going, it draws a lot more data versus just the actual audio version. So starting, I think I've got like 4, 5, 6 shows on there right now. This show will be up tomorrow. So that's another option for everybody out there. But I appreciate everybody to go over, I appreciate everybody if they went over and just checked out the podcast form to try to get that up, get the algorithm going so we can distribute it to other people. And yeah, Keith, great story. I'm glad I got to hear the backstory on all that. It was, you see a company like War Eagle and you're always wondering, how did that start and who's behind it all. And I may actually be staying in your house coming up here in the next month or so down there at Table Rock. So,
well, I hope you get to and enjoy it.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll wrap it up. Thanks everybody for hanging out, and we will see you next week, same time and same place.